is that in the state of Texas, on Tuesday evening, they noticed up a hearing that took place on Thursday morning, yesterday morning, that actually lasted the whole day because of the way their committee procedures work, where they adjourn and then they go into session and they come back. And they had a series of very controversial abortion bills that were heard first, and that took most of the day, which complicated travel schedules for our experts. But what we were advised was that we should have a number of three experts that could testify. So we designated former Senator Kurt Bramble from Utah, and we had Bob Durkin, former FDA official, and Dr. Kirsten Smith from Johns Hopkins as our principal AKA witnesses. And then we recruited, and many of you on this call participated in actually attending the hearing along with advocates. And I can tell you that that the messaging was superb. And what we were facing was a railroad bill where they were just going to push it out. Senator Perry, the sponsor of this ban bill, which classifies kratom as a Schedule 1 substance, was is going to clear the Senate. There's an outside chance we might be able to get an amendment, but we're not anticipating that unless lightning strikes. But we do have an opportunity on the House side to derail this thing. So that's sort of the problem that we confront. Senator Perry, we are told, has the strong support of Lieutenant Governor Patrick. They, of course, are running concurrently a very strong hemp bill, which will ban many of the hemp products that are available in Texas, and they classify those as the intoxicating hemp products. And we're swept up into this virtue signaling by Senator Perry. And you will, if you take the opportunity to watch the hearing, which you should watch it, you will see that the senator acknowledged that in fact kratom in its pure form is fine, but we can't control the bad actors, and the only way to do that would be to ban it, which makes, from a common sense standpoint, really doesn't make much sense, but that it is what it is. So that's why we wanted to convene this call to let you know, principally because if Texas falls, it is a cascading, deteriorating situation for the kratom community because that will empower the FDA, and it will obviously give us multiple problems in the states as we go forward. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to let Senator Bramble tell you from his perspective, being there on the ground, exactly what he observed and his experience there, and then I'll come back in and follow up after that. So, Kurt, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mac. As Mac said, we had the hearing yesterday. I had the opportunity among the three representatives of AKA, I had the opportunity to go first. But before we started, during the day, the way the committee worked, we convened at 9 a.m. They held the hearing for a couple of hours. Then they convened on the floor. This committee is held on the floor of the Texas Senate. So we were on the floor of the Senate for a couple of hours. They recessed the committee, convened the Senate for Senate business. Then they recessed for lunch. Then later in the afternoon, about 1:30 in the afternoon, they reconvened the committee through the evening. The reason that's important, I had the opportunity to meet with Senator Perry, the sponsor of Senate Bill, it's 1868 is the bill that's in question, the hemp bill, Senate Bill 3. But Senate Bill 1868, I spent about 20 minutes with Senator Perry. And during the course of that, he mentioned multiple times to both myself and to our lobbyist, he said, look, I understand that kratom in its pure form has some real benefit. I get it, and it's safe. I understand that. He said, but the problem is we can't enforce the registration, and members of your industry have told me that we cannot enforce or prohibit bad actors, that the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is without teeth, it is worthless, and there's no way to enforce the provisions that would limit that. Now, to put it bluntly, if you read the bill, it defines what is being banned is kratom, kratom products, including metrogeny, mitragynine naturally contained in the plant, metrogeny speciosa, korth, synthetic equivalents of the substances contained in the plant, and their isomers, esters, ethers, salts, and salts of isomers, esters, ethers, and 7-hydroxy metrogeny, going on with the same description. But what stunned me was we had that same experience here in Utah, where there was a bill introduced this year by Representative Daley Provo that we supported, and we wanted to strengthen the regulatory structure. And the reason that this is so important for the industry, keep in mind that the entire challenge to kratom began with the FDA saying that kratom is a dangerous substance, and they proved that because there were 9 deaths in Sweden, then they found 44 deaths, and they attributed all of those to kratom. We now know that the problem with, and we've known for since 2019, that the problem with every one of those cases was it was adulterated kratom, kratom that has been adulterated with other chemicals, narcotics, barbiturates, etc., that cause problems. Well, here in Utah, the lobbyists testifying on behalf of the Global Kratom Coalition and Mr. Lowe testifying on behalf of the Global Kratom Coalition testified that the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is worthless. It cannot be enforced. It's not being enforced. It is toothless. Why is that important? There's only been one company, as we have been testifying in states throughout the country. Just in the last few weeks, I personally had occasion to be in Jefferson City, Missouri, Des Moines, Iowa, Bismarck, North Dakota. I was in Austin, Texas. We were in North Carolina, and we run into the objections at every turn from this organization called the Global Kratom Coalition. In Utah, they came on record and they said there can be the enforcement doesn't work. The sponsor of the bill in Texas said members of the industry have told me that enforcement does not work. Now, the challenge here is, I'll give you an example. In North Dakota, we had a bill, and for whatever reason, it was changed to just a study that they may study whether they should regulate kratom or not. We oppose that. We want it regulated. We want to stop the bad actors from adulterating the product. So we proposed the following language in North Dakota. This is no kratom product can be exposed for sale if, and item number 3 in the list says a product that contains or is adulterated with any of the following: a kratom product that contains a dangerous non-kratom substance if it contains a poisonous or otherwise deleterious non-kratom ingredient, including but not limited to the substances listed as controlled substances under state or federal law. Okay. Now, we got a note from our, I'll read it verbatim. The drafting attorney is writing the official amendment language today based on our suggestions. I talked with her this morning and she will send her draft over later today. Committee chair knows we are waiting and is supportive. Also, your friends at GKC want the limitations in number 3 removed from the amendment. We remove that from the amendment. Keep in mind, this is the organization that says regulations have no teeth and are not being enforced. And on the other hand, when we propose language in a statute that very clearly says that kratom in its pure form, the impact is kratom in its pure form, whether it's kratom plant, powder, crushed leaf, or kratom extracts from just the plant without being concentrated or synthesized additives included, they're opposing that. And they oppose that on one hand because they don't want products that are adulterated to be prohibited. And then on the other hand, they say that the Kratom Consumer Protection Act has no teeth. To every member of the industry that's listening in, we're going to lose this battle if this continues with a group that aligns itself as being spokesman for the kratom industry when they continue to say that enforcement doesn't work. In Texas, when the Senate sponsor said, the industry has told me that enforcement doesn't work, therefore the only thing we can do is ban kratom in its entirety. Yes, we know there's some good, but we're willing to lose the good to get rid of the bad. That's coming directly from members of the kratom industry, and it's creating a no-win situation. Uh, Mac, is there anything else that you and I have had several discussions on this? Have I missed any part of this that you wanted me to reference?
No, if you could just highlight what happened in terms of your impression of the presentations that were made by the advocates and the vendors that were
What,
there, because
what,
I think your perspective is very valuable there.
okay, there is nothing more powerful than personal stories that tell the narrative about the benefits of kratom. Whether it's Jeremy Stedding with his story about how he got involved, whether it's a military veteran, the members of the industry that were there testifying about their businesses and what their customer base is, and the advocates that are telling their story that kratom is saving their life, that kratom has been an effective tool, whether it's pain management, getting past opioid addiction, a pick me up in the morning, all of those things. There is no substitute for personal stories. In the case of Senator Perry, I told him that I understood where he was coming from because I was at exactly the same place he was when Mac first told me about kratom. I didn't accept it. I looked at what the FDA said, and I testified to this. I said, you know, Senator, I understand why you've drawn the conclusions you have because that was a literature that we were exposed to in 2018 and the beginning of 2019. The problem is there's been a wealth of science since then that has contradicted virtually everything the FDA has said. When you combine that with Kirsten Smith, she is the nation's foremost kratom researcher in terms of the impact of kratom on humans. You have Bob Durkin, who was the director of the FDA's nutritional supplement program that knows this stuff inside and out. As a matter of fact, Bob Durkin was one of the people with the FDA in 2015 that when Brian Harrison blew the whistle with Dr. Joie and said, hey, there's more to this.
It was
Durkin was on,
2018,
what's
2018,
that?
2018, not 15.
No, no. Durkin was with, he was there in 2015, starting in 2015. He was against Kratom in 2015
Right?
as
No,
well.
right.
And then, and that he was on the anti-kratom side. In 2018, we had Brian Harrison, literally without Brian Harrison stepping in and getting Dr. Joie to write a letter to the FDA saying essentially that their science was poor, that it was an embarrassment, and withdrawing the request for scheduling. All of that's past history. But that history and helping people understand that the FDA had their day in court, literally in San Diego. They've had their day in the political court of public opinion in several states, and we are winning the battle right up to the point that we have members of the industry that are intentionally sabotaging and derailing every effort to regulate kratom so that we know that the products aren't adulterated, we know that they're properly labeled, and that there's proper dosage recommendations and such. If we don't do this, if we concede to those members of the industry that are supporting GKC's agenda, we will lose the entire battle to normalize kratom. But I can't emphasize more for advocates, for members of the industry that are manufacturers, that are distributors, that are retailers, your stories, there is no substitute for the personal stories. Legislators will pay attention to constituents in their district that have these stories far more likely than they will folks that are coming in from out of state. It's important that we have the expertise, the dream team of Kirsten Smith and Bob Durkin, Jack Henningfield, and the rest of the team that has been testifying regularly. But we're not a substitute for the personal stories.
Yeah, thank you, Kurt. And I asked for that emphasis because we have a strategic difference on this point. When the discussion early yesterday morning was taking place about the who should be testifying in this hearing, the GKC lobbyist advised that we should not allow any vendor or any advocate to speak at the hearing. And I made a field decision to say we're not going to observe that. And the reason I made that decision is that I have seen in the multiple of hearings that I've been participating in, what Kurt Bramble just told you is true. It's important to set the baseline with respect to the policy and science arguments, but nothing moves these legislators more than hearing from their constituents. And when you watch the hearing, you'll see that there were veterans that were testifying. Vendors made an absolutely compelling case. Jeremy Stedding, I know Payam was there. There were people that stood up, and John did. I mean, it was fantastic, and I think that it actually made a substantial dent in the inertia that Senator Perry had developed on that committee. And in fact, when Senator Perry he has this penchant for interrupting people, and you only have 2 minutes to speak as a witness. He even apologized to Bob Durkin and said, I cut you off, but you can finish your statement. And it opened the door, and I observed a change in the way that the hearing was going at that point, because that then triggered a number of other questions from other members that were the interactions were terrific because we got a lot of information out to the committee. Kirsten Smith and Bob Durkin were absolutely fabulous on the science and the policy and describing why the conflict exists with the FDA and Kratom. And so while it may, because of political pressures, may not make a huge difference in the outcome of the vote, although it's possible that it will. It still set the baseline for a lot of discussions. And when the House gets involved, if the Senate passes this ban, then there'll be some accounting that I think that members of the Senate who were participating in that hearing will have a much better perspective to report back to their House colleagues about why there might be an opportunity to do something different. And that opportunity is that we have an amendment to the bill. Instead of banning kratom, that we ban synthetic 7-hydroxymetrogenine. And that, of course, is the most dangerous product that's on the market today. I know that there is a mythology being promoted by others in the industry that the AKA is soft on 7-OH. That is untrue, and you could look at the record to prove that's untrue. What we are for is good science, and as Dr. Joie told me when he withdrew the scheduling recommendation by the FDA, he said, "I'm not a fan of kratom. I don't know much about it, but I'm a fan of good science." And the same thing is true in our position with respect to 7-OH. I'm a fan of observing the law, and the law does allow, under certain circumstances, for a metabolite, 7-hydroxymetrogenine, to be considered under conditions of use and appropriate scientific evidence for safety to enter the marketplace. What we have learned and flushed out of the 7-hydroxymetrogenine industry is that they have no basis for safety, they have no scientific evidence, and that they have no indications for use because they don't have that. And I'll give you an illustration. If you were to convert the 2% of the total overall alkaloids in a product, which is the current standard in the KCPAs that we actually advocate for, you would see that that converts to less than 1 milligram of 7-OH at the highest level that it could be in any identified product levels. The average dose of a 7-hydroxymetrogenine product on the market today ranges from 7 to 30 milligrams. That is monumental increases in a product that has full binding affinity to the mu-opioid receptors. So it is a potentially a very dangerous product. And until and if the 7-hydroxymetrogenine people can produce the required scientific evidence for market entry, they should be banned. And that's the position of the AKA. And so,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so
Go ahead.
we've offered the amendment that says that replacing the language that says that the kratom and kratom products should be scheduled as Schedule 1, but rather that striking that and saying synthesized 7-hydroxymetrogenine should be banned. And of course, the other amendment to the bill is that we strike the repeal of the existing Kratom Consumer Protection Act, which is in that bill today. So that's our objective. Here's the challenge. This is going to take a very similar effort to what we saw in Montana 2 years ago. where at the last minute the legislature threw a ban in, and we had to scramble and we had to hire three lobbyists at very expensive terms because we were at the end of the session. They knew that we had a gun to our heads, and we had to beat it. And that happened on a Thursday night. And on Monday, the last day of the session, we had a 100-0 vote against the ban bill that had been passed by the Senate. That's an example of what we can do, but it requires resources. So every member of the industry that's on this call needs to think about your market opportunity in the state of Texas and help us in order to beat it. We are in the process of negotiating with three additional lobbyists in the state of Texas, which will focus on specific influencers in the legislature, including the lieutenant governor, the Senate majority leader, and the Speaker of the House. These are expensive terms and they are outside of our current budget capacity. So I'm taking a flyer here. I've had some industry people that have stepped up and said, we're going to help, and we deeply appreciate that. But if you sell your product in Texas, you need to jump on board here and help us in order to defeat this particular piece of legislation, because if it's banned in Texas, that market goes away. And if it's banned in Texas, it is going to be the calling card for all of the anti-kratom people to start promoting this around the country. We cannot afford to lose the state of Texas in this kind of a battle. So we will work hard in order to get this done with whatever resources we have. But the more resources we have, the better chance we have of defeating this bill. So for those of you that are willing to help, if you'll email me after this call, I would be grateful to have the discussion and to explain to you what we're talking about. And I'll give you a sort of a ballpark. I've interviewed three firms today. First off, very difficult to find a firm that isn't already conflicted or afraid of Senator Perry, because he's carrying now a hemp bill, which has drawn huge amount of controversy and a lot of lobbying firms. And that's, of course, the intoxicating hemp products. And so finding and identifying these people, and when I have, it's been, there are 2 months left in the session, and they recognize that it's a high cost endeavor. So I can tell you that the challenge is there, and we desperately need to do it. And just following on what Kurt told you, we're seeing this in other states too. And this is inefficient. If this were a business, we'd be out of business, because we're now, for example, in the state of Rhode Island, we went through a very painful negotiation with the governor's office to assure that the bill that he approved would not be vetoed. And there were some provisions in that bill that we do not like, but there are provisions in the bill that are important, which includes a repeal of the current ban and allows for the proper regulation of kratom products so that we get rid of the bad actors. Some pieces of that bill are just simply not something that we would like or accept. I conveyed that to the Botanicals for Better Health and Wellness group and to the Global Kratom Coalition. I told them how sensitive it was. I told them that the governor was willing to accept those terms. And even when we tried to negotiate additional terms, this is what we came out with. And this was represented by the governor's office to be the bottom line. And he will sign this bill if it passes. I learned today that the Global Kratom Coalition has hired a lobbyist in the state of Rhode Island after I told them about the circumstances, and they now are proposing a set of amendments. This is shooting ourselves in the foot. It makes no sense. And I know that there's been this festering problem. Some like to characterize it as a personality conflict. It is not. It is a policy and strategy conflict. And I will stand on the record of the American Kratom Association. 14 bills that have passed that are providing a beachhead against what the FDA is trying to do. And we need now the industry to consolidate and decide what they want for the future, because these kinds of internecine wars simply do not work. I was describing this to one of our lobbyists in the States, and he said, why are we doing this if we're just shooting ourselves in the foot this way? So it's really a terrible situation we're in that can only be resolved by the vendors. You simply have to figure out where you want to be and look at the track record and decide who has the interest at heart. And I'll add one thing to what Kurt said. While we were debating the Utah bills, the proposal from the Global Kratom Coalition was to add a definition to the kratom compound products to define those as kratom extracts, when in fact kratom extracts are derived wholly from metrogeny. not from anything else, not a compound product, not any other substance. And yet they wanted to do that. And in their testimony, they specifically cited a kratom extract product. That's the attack. And it's a retaliatory attack. It makes no sense, but it's petty, frankly, when you come down to it. So we find ourselves in this position now where we all need to work together. And I've tried my best. I've tried to reach out and try to set up meetings. It doesn't matter. The conditions for those meetings are essentially that it's got to be one way or the highway, and those are unacceptable terms. So that's the unfortunate situation that we're in. But I sincerely want this success to come. I want the industry to survive, and more important than all of that is I want consumers to have access to safely formulated and properly labeled kratom products. That's our goal. That is not a goal that's shared by some other people that are working in this space. And the time's now to kind of draw a line in the sand. You decide where you want to be. I respect everyone's right to make their decisions. I understand that there can be competitive issues, there can be product protection issues. That's part of the reality of the marketplace. But shooting down the good in order to accomplish a very narrow objective like that just doesn't seem to make much sense. So I'm gonna stop there. We can open it up for any questions. I see there's some questions that have been posted in the question and answers, and I'm glad to answer those. You can add to them. So I'll start with Amanda. Can we get the 7-OH band with anything over 2% so we're not losing kratom? Yes, and that's our objective, and that's what we put into our bill. State by state ban is absurd and not allowing advocates, vendors, and those who have the science. We need all our voices. Amen. We need to respect and hear those voices as we're going. Misty asks, are you telling me the GKC is solely responsible for Texas and other states? No. What I'm saying is that whether it's intentional or not, when you develop a strategy that says that the KCPAs, and to me, it's an absurd conclusion, when the KCPAs are not being enforced effectively, that's a bad message. And I can tell you that it's not true. And Kurt described to you the conflict. When the GKC says, oh, well, they're not being enforced correctly, they're in the trouble in Utah because the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food is enforcing the law. And they've challenged the safety profile of one of the products that they're advocating for. There's nothing wrong with that. They simply have to come to the table and prove it. But that's what they were trying to do. So
let me respond on that question, if I may, because I spoke with Senator Perry directly. Misty, Senator Perry did not tell me that it was GKC. I want to be clear on that. What Senator Perry told me was that members of the industry have told him that enforcement is feckless, that enforcement is toothless, that enforcement doesn't work. He then concluded, based on industry telling him that the only thing he could do was to ban kratom in its entirety. Now that's the reality in Texas. The other states that I've testified in, including my own state of Utah, we've had the GKC lobbyist testify that the Kratom Consumer Protection Act is not being enforced and that it is toothless. You can draw your own conclusions on whether there's a connection or not. But the reality is, if the industry doesn't get its act together and start self-policing the messages that are coming out of some of the outliers that are creating this conflict, when we have a company, and this is GKC in North Dakota, that says, no, we don't want the language that would stop adulterated products. No, we oppose the language that would oppose anything that is dangerous or deleterious. We want that struck, or we're going to oppose the North Dakota law. You can draw your own conclusion about who is responsible for what's happening in other states, because they are the only organization that I'm aware of, as I've been testifying in other states, that's hired lobbyists to deliver that message. Now, in those states where I have firsthand knowledge, yes, I can say that was GKC's lobbyist, or it was Matt Lowe delivering those messages. Is that happening in every state? I don't know. Did it happen in Texas? I don't know the members of industry that told Senator Perry that the Kratom Consumer Protection Act can't be enforced. But I do know this. As a 24-year veteran of the Utah Senate, when you have an industry that is split, that's giving mixed messages, the easiest thing to do is what they're doing in Texas. The easiest thing to do is say, let's get rid of the whole thing. Then we don't need to engage in this kind of industry drama. So draw your own conclusion.
Yeah, and I would also like to add that there are many, many things that are advocated for by the GKC that are great. Uh, but the underlying message. It's the Trojan horse, it appears, that they adopt a lot of the good things that the creative industry is trying to do, and they have this underlying objective that I think gets in the way and has shown its head in Texas. It certainly showed its head in North Dakota and in Utah and other states. So when the survey's done, and this is a great example, showing that 7OH is not being appropriately regulated in the states, there are two issues there. First is that the federal enforcement mechanism is no different. It is a self-regulation model, and Commissioner Califf, former FDA commissioner, testifying before, I think it was the Energy and Commerce Committee last year, was asked how they are enforcing the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. And Commissioner Califf said correctly, you set the rules, we enforce them. We do not have a Gestapo to go out and inspect every location, but we are the referee and we see a violation, we blow the whistle, and we go in and act. And they do for the most part. They're not doing it exactly the way we would like for Kratom, but that's the way that this is designed, because to adopt a different system would require the most onerous, expensive kind of regulation system known to man, and nobody can afford it. And we're seeing, for example, in the state of Florida, the fiscal note just went up another $2 million. So it's around 4 million in order to enforce the model legislation that was adopted by the Global Kratom Coalition, and we have 21 amendments in on it. And the sponsor of their bill just said, no, no, I'm not interested. So we have a battle in Florida coming up too. So these are the challenges we confront. But everybody has to be accountable. And I think that's important. And I get emails every time we have one of these calls from Matt Lowe saying, oh, that isn't true. That isn't true. And yet when you pull it apart, of course, what we're saying is true. There's just no accountability along the way. So again, an industry-wide meeting where we can sit down and have these discussions is great. We are meeting in Washington, D.C. on April 23rd and 24th. The 23rd is going to be a Hill Visit Day. We want vendors to come and any advocates they can sponsor to go up on the Hill and have contacts. We're also going to be doing a lawyers meeting on product liability suits that day. And then we have our summit meeting, leadership council meeting the next day, where we're going to talk about these important issues. Be a great time to have that conversation if it can be reasonably accommodated. And we don't limit anyone. We don't make conditions on, we're not going to have this meeting unless you do this for us. And that's part of the problem that we're running into. Scott asked the question, in addition to 7-OH being banned, would you also include pseudodoxil, which is a metabolite of 7-OH and is much more potent, according to the scientists, and extremely dangerous and can cause breathing suppression on its own? Absolutely. The only way that you can get to pseudodoxil is if you have synthesized 7-OH, and then you take another step in that process in order to create pseudodoxil. So absolutely, the language that we have in our model KCPAs covering synthesization covers these products, and certainly they should be banned as we go along. So I think that's important to know. So, and we're going to continue to work on in clarifying for everyone that we are opposed to 7-OH and pseudodoxil as we go forward. Amanda asked about a Washington, D.C. rally. I think that's a possibility. As we go forward, we will have the Federal Kratom Consumer Protection Act, which will be refiled here in the next couple of weeks. And we're looking to, around that, identify a date that would be appropriate for a Washington, full-blown Washington rally, and we'll work on doing that. It's a really important thing that we can do. Kathy asked how consumers can help. Show up at these meetings at local bands and in your state offices. Too many times I go to hearings and there aren't many people there. And I know the legislative process is messy. We have a hearing coming up in Arkansas that was supposed to be one day. They just changed it. And that means flight changes for our experts coming in, and we lost some experts. I mean, this is a very messy system that we're going forward on, but we have to live within those rules that are set by the legislatures, and we do our best to do that. Adam asked about Texas. Basically, the senator is saying that people's
Well,
lives.
let me respond to that one, if I may. Senator Perry was saying specifically, he understands that kratom has some benefit, but because the product can, he claims, based on what he has been told by the industry and what he has observed, this is what he told me, that the regulation doesn't work because it's not you can't enforce it was his basic pitch. And so he's saying, look, it is far greater danger to have adulterated product on the market than the benefit of keeping the. He says, I know that there's good with kratom, but the bad way outweighs the good. Therefore, the based on his position that it's not that the enforcement doesn't work, that the only alternative is to ban it. We talked to him about people suffering. We talked to him about the damage, the harm that would be done for those that are using it to support their well-being. It's not that he doesn't care about it, he said, but the danger of the adulterated products far exceeds any benefit is his position, and that's in part driven by what he's understood from I don't know which members of the industry. That's why it's so important for the industry to have discussions among yourselves. If you're involved with various organizations, that's fine, but we've got to stop this mixed messaging of saying on one hand regulation doesn't work, and on the other hand having your lobbyist oppose the very language in a proposed bill that would make certain that kratom is not being adulterated.
Yeah, and I think that just to add to that for a second, that the challenge here is that you have these people that are in a position that to have a claim that in fact we're not regulating it properly. We spoke with the staffer in Senator Zaffarini's office, who was our sponsor 2 years ago of the KCPA. Now this staffer was new. She wasn't there when Senator Zaffarini was our champion. And she said, well, I don't think kratom, based on the committee staff meeting preparing for this hearing, should be allowed. And I said, well, your boss is the one who sponsored it. Yes, but we didn't know the challenges that are out there because no one's enforcing it. So this narrative has infected that whole process. And just as an example, back to what Utah does, there's a report that was issued by the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, where they've talked about how they block products that are non-compliant, how they've identified products that are in the marketplace that are non-compliant, removed them, how they do spot testing, and they actually test products. And so they're doing a great job enforcing it under the model that it was developed precisely for botanical and dietary supplements. Now we want a drug regimen in terms of regulations, and that, of course, is onerous and should not be done. Terry says that he or she is in Austin. That person was there yesterday. What can you do to help? I'm fired up. Great, because we got lots more opportunities for help in Austin coming up when we go through the House hearings, and so we'll count on you for that. But thank you for being there. And I don't know if you were one of the ones who spoke, but the testimony of those advocates was phenomenal. It really made a difference, and it's something that is absolutely great. Sandra asked, what's the timeline? We expect that this bill, unless something really good happens, is going to pass through the Senate sometime next week. It's certainly out of committee, and maybe the next week out of the Senate, and then it goes over to the House, and that's where we are going to really have our fight, unless something great happens. And as I say, we're retaining lobbyists to try to make that something great happen along the way. And hopefully we get a epiphany from Senator Perry himself. David asked, who typically enforces the KCPA in other states? It varies. It depends on which agency has the most experience, and it's one of the most difficult issues that we have when we introduce KCPAs, because we ask the states to decide which is the best regulatory agency. So today we have some with the Department of Agriculture, as is done in Utah, and we're proposing in our on our refinement bill in Georgia. There are some that have the Department of Revenue that supervises the sale of adult products, so that you can enforce the age limit, and they have inspectors that go out and check for cigarettes and alcohol and that kind of thing. Easy lift for them to do kratom. We have some tax agencies that will do it, and some in the Department of Health. So it's just a mixed bag depending on what the appetite in the legislature is and the willingness of that regulatory agency to accept it. Example, in Montana, the Department of Health has thrown up their arms, or the Department of Revenue said, we don't want it because we don't know enough about it, and yet someone has to do it. So we're negotiating and talking through those kinds of things. But it's not something that we can easily say, this is the way it should be. We can recommend, and we largely recommend departments of agriculture because it is a plant, but we can live with whatever the states come up with, as long as we can work on these issues actually with some consistency. And that's hard because every legislature has power players and they know better than us and they know better than anybody. And so we sometimes have to live with that. Um, Anthony asked about what the mission statement is. I'll say it again. GKC does some great things, and I think they have great materials largely. I think the agenda is what you have to look at, and I've drawn the line on it. I can tell you with certainty that I have tried my best in order to orchestrate an opportunity for us to come together. When I negotiated the model KCPA for 2025, I sat with the representatives from the Botanicals for Better Health and Wellness and with Matt Lowe from GKC, and we agreed on the language. And then I said, okay, can we all agree that this language will be supported by our lobbyists and our representatives speaking in hearings? And Matt Lowe said, no, I can't go that far. What is he talking about? So in other words, he gets to endorse the legislation, but then he can amend it later any way he wants. And that's what we're seeing, unfortunately, in some of those states. Very difficult. The mission statement they have is not the way that they're playing the game. I can tell you that. And I wish it were different because I can tell you my life's too short. Uh, I would rather, if we could find a way to cooperate with them, not have to go in and fight their lobbyists. And I'm in state after state, and I see these lobbyists stand up and say things that I know are demonstrably false. They testified in the state of Montana to a provision in the bill that was not there anymore. And while the GKC representative was testifying, the legislators are flipping through the bill and say, where is that? It had been stripped out of the bill, and the lobbyists that they were working with, not representing them directly, but they were in communication with, knew it. And it caused nothing but confusion there. So this is again unforced errors. We don't need to have this kind of nonsense, but it's not going to change until someone within the industry says we're done. We need to cooperate. We need to find one unified message going forward. And the only unified message GKC has is their message. And I've tried to bend as far as we can bend, but we're about consumers, and we're not going to just favor one product or one company in going forward. And unfortunately, it's too narrow on that side.
Mac, to Anthony, there's a difference between what people say or what mission statements portray versus the actual actions where the boots meet the ground, where boots on the ground, the rubber meets the road. What someone says versus what someone does. There's a saying that your actions speak so loud, I can't hear a word you're saying. And that has been applied in this arena multiple times.
Yeah, and Kathy asked the next question: can local regular people report abusers selling 7-OH to someone in state government? Yes, you can. You pick up the phone and you call the Consumer Protection Division at the Attorney General's office and you report it, and that's going to cause an investigation if enough people do that. The AKA, which is soft on 7-OH, we advocate for criminal prosecutions against these people that are selling these products. I was in an attorney general's office just 2 days ago advocating for just that. And that's the way to start this. I think it's important for us all to do it as we go forward. Cheryl asked, what can customers do to help out? I'm in New Jersey, but we would love to do what you can. New Jersey has a trade and ban bill that we think we have bottled up, but we're going to need help there. And we also have a KCPA. That's a year-long legislature, so we're going to work on that, and we'll certainly watch for the alerts that come out along the way. Misty asked what the dates are in DC. It's 23rd and 24th of April going forward. David asked, why was the Texas senator referencing the enforcement would cost billions? Are we able to give data from Utah on how the cost of enforcement will be covered by product registration? Well, the statement by Senator Perry was hyperbolic, but it would cost that amount of money if you wanted to implement the regulatory scheme that he's talking about, which is to treat it as a new drug. He was saying it costs billions. Why doesn't the industry just invest in making it a new drug? So we do a new drug application, which means one company, by the way. It's not patentable because it's a plant material. You would have to chemically convert it, which is what we don't want. Now, so someone's free to do that, and some are, but that's not the natural plant. And Senator Perry was just misinformed on that subject. Cody asked, what are the chances, do we know the chances of amendment of the bill banning 7-OH and not Kratom as a whole? We're hoping that that will be the House version of this bill. It would be great to kill the bill, but it would be better if we could put into a codified statute that says that 7-OH is banned as a Schedule I substance, and it meets the criteria, by the way. Interestingly, the state of Texas uses the same criteria as the federal government for the scheduling of substances, and I think that that it would be effective there. And Cody goes on to say that are they more favorable listening to the facts from Robert Durkin and Dr. Smith yesterday, amending it? Some, I think, were interested in that. I don't think Senator Perry is there yet. We're hopeful to get him there. We'll continue to work with him. I can tell you, I started out with discussions with legislators who were hell bent to ban kratom. Ready, and well, Senator Ellsworth in Montana did it. And then he told me later, hey, I hear you, and I will support your bill going forward. So I think that's real important. So it's one of those things that we have to kind of deal with. Uh, the next question. So did Texas Senate vote yes on the ban? No. There's been no vote, but we expect that the vote will take place sometime next week or the following week to get it out of the Senate. And then it'll go over to the House. And we don't know when the House hearing is going to be held in Austin. These are tricky schedules. They just like happened this week. They didn't tell us until Tuesday night that there would be a hearing on Thursday morning. That was awful, but we have to do the best we can. Um, so David is just sharing some information that's important about working with the agriculture commissioner in Texas. We're following up on that. Great intel. Thank you so much for that. Um, and Kathy asked, would that complicate things at this moment in Texas or help? I'm not sure. You must have referenced an earlier question. I apologize, but uh, let me close by just saying that we need to unify as an industry and on behalf of consumers. I know that there have been differences of opinion about the regulatory plans and proposals that we have offered from the American Kratom Association, but they have always been developed in a consensus position. And while individuals may not agree, our objective has always been to create the most open, competitive marketplace of safely formulated and properly labeled kratom products. That's our goal. And there are efforts underway now to undermine specific segments of the industry. I know that there is not universal approval of all the product formulations that are out there, but if those product formulations have passed the threshold test of having a scientific basis and a reasonable scientific basis for market entry under the conditions of use, meaning labeling, then they should go on the market. And when challenged, they should provide the documentation for it. And that's the way that the self-regulation model works in all of this. So I think that while there are differences, and we've seen groups come to the fore and then leave because they wanted to promote a specific product or an industry perspective, we try to integrate the industry perspective through our Kratom Industry Council. It gives the opportunity for input, and it's been invaluable, but we also listen to consumers. We are not perfect. I'm not perfect. But I can tell you that our hearts are in the right place in moving forward. And you'll never have to question whether we are trying to promote a hidden agenda along the way, because that's not the game we're in. We're trying our best, and I think our record proves it. You can go back and say, what's the body of work that we've done, and we hope that you'll be supportive of that going forward. But we are at a crossroads. We're at the point where we're seeing now the emergence of unnecessary problems and challenges that are the direct result of mixed messaging within the industry. And that's only resolved if we can have cooler heads sit down and say, let's get to the bottom line here and decide how we can cooperate and then hold people accountable. My suspicion is that the difficulty in getting that done is that the other groups know exactly what our position is, and they want us to move in areas that we can't accept. And those are anti-competitive provisions. They are product limiting provisions for otherwise safe products, and they benefit one or two products along the way. And that's the part that is most perplexing as we go forward. So we'll end there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to take some time out of your day today. Stand by. And again, I invite anyone who will email me. I'm glad to get on a call. We can discuss how you can help because we need to meet this challenge in Texas. And there'll be others, but we need to do it as fast as we can. And I appreciate it very much. So thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.